Welcome to the Introduction to eBay webinar. My name is Mike Wood. I'm going to be your coach and your mentor here. What I want to do today is talk a little bit about eBay as a platform. So this is going to be an overview of what eBay likes to see, why, and the best ways to work with eBay and get started, especially if you're brand new. Okay? So something that's really important to understand with eBay is they've been around. Number one, understand they've been around for over 25 years. They've been around for a long time. They've built up this great marketplace, and they exist solely as a third-party marketplace where the only way they make money is to let people like you and me come in and sell on their platform. Okay? And so that's a big difference between them and Amazon. Amazon sells their own products and ships their own products and does a lot of warehousing and stuff. eBay doesn't do any of that. And so the only way eBay is going to make money is letting you and I come in, create an account, sell things, and then they take a percentage. They take 10% of the final value. Whatever we sell on eBay, whether it's a combined shipping amount that we receive and amount for the item, total amount that we receive. If it's $100, they're going to take 10. That's just the way they work. Now they do have a variation of fees anywhere from 3.5% to 12%, but for most items that you're going to mess with, it's going to be 10%. That's the average. Okay. So that 10%, as I mentioned before, that's total on everything you receive. So if you sell something for $90 and charge $10 shipping, you receive a total of $100. They're going to charge their 10% on that $100, not just on the $90. Okay, and that's something they changed a few years back, several years back actually, because people were manipulating their system and going in and selling an item for 1 penny and then charging $100 shipping, and they were only getting charged fees on the 1 penny, right? And so eBay looked at that and said, hey, that's kind of an abuse. We're offering this service. Don't abuse the service. And so finally they just said, hey, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to just charge 10% flat on everything. You do whatever you want and play whatever games you want with shipping. This is how we're doing it. And so, for business platform, that makes sense. I understand why they're doing it. They cannot survive without having some kind of income. And so as sellers, we've got to be sensitive to that and recognize that they're offering us a fantastic platform. Literally millions of buyers come through their website every single day. And so without that, we've got to do all the work on our own, right? What I really want to focus on here is how to grow quickly and easily on eBay in the beginning, okay? So I'm going to give you a little more history about eBay because when you have a platform like them, one of the things that comes in is, unfortunately, we have fraudsters out there who try and take advantage of other people. And they might go list a whole bunch of, this is something that actually happened on eBay. They'd have fraudsters come in and let's say they listed a bunch of appliances, maybe they listed these ice makers, and they would list all of these products, thousands of dollars of brand new items, and they would sell. The fraudster would take the money, close down their bank account, move, and nobody could track them. They'd never ship anything. And so, unfortunately, that meant that the buyer was left holding an empty bag, right? With no item being received, their money was gone, and that gave eBay a black eye. They don't want to be seen that way. And so they had to come in and implement some changes to prevent that from happening. And it's interesting to me that it took them about 20 years or more to really figure out how to avoid that. And what they finally implemented was they just said, okay, here's how we'll do it. When there's somebody who comes in as a brand new seller on eBay, we're going to make them prove themselves. We've got to make sure they're legit. So when somebody pays them for their first items, for the first 3 months, we're going to hold those funds. We're going to have PayPal hold on to it and not even release it to them until we know the item has actually been delivered and the buyer doesn't have a problem. Well, that's an obvious, easy cure, right? You can't commit fraud taking people's money if you don't even get the money until the item has been not only shipped but delivered and the buyer doesn't complain, right? And so great, great business strategy. I think it works well for eBay. I'm personally glad they do it because it helps get rid of that seller fraud. Unfortunately, if you're brand new to eBay, that's a little bit of a headache for you because that means you don't get those funds immediately. You have to wait until the item has been shipped and delivered, and then once the tracking shows it's been delivered, then PayPal releases those funds to you. Okay? And so either that, or if there's no tracking number for them to track, then they release it after 21 days. Okay? And so that is one thing they implemented. Another thing that they've done is they put limits on how many items a new seller can sell. So they'll limit the number of items or the dollar amount. You can either list 100 items or up to $5,000, whichever limit you hit first. Okay? So it varies from one person to another. Sometimes they might limit you to only 10 items. Other times, I've seen a lot more lately where it's been a brand new seller can list up to 100 items or $5,000 of inventory on eBay. But that varies from person to person. Like I say, sometimes it might be only 10 items and $1,000. It might be 1,000 items and $25,000. It's all over the board. There's no rhyme or reason to really see why they do it different, but just be aware that those limits are there. We have strategies to help you overcome those limits, but what the main focus I want you to understand from what I've told you here is, number one, we need to build our reputation on eBay as soon as possible. Number two, we need to make sure they feel comfortable with us as a seller. Okay? Now, the reputation, let's look at that. So if we go into one of these items, over here you'll see seller information, you'll see the seller's name, and behind their name in parentheses, you'll see a number, sometimes accompanied with a star. Okay? So this is on every listing, once you get into the listing, there's a seller information on the right. Okay? So that name is the seller's name, and then the number behind their name is the number of positive feedback scores they have received from either buyers or sellers. It doesn't matter whether that's buyer or seller score. If you receive feedback, it goes on the back of your name there. Okay? Now, if you're starting a brand new account, that number is going to be 0. And if you have a 0 feedback, guess how much confidence that gives to potential buyers? 0, right? So the bigger that number, the better. So one of your first goals is to build your feedback, and that is I've got a webinar that I'll be sending out in the beginning here and teaching you how to do that. So we won't go over that right now. But that's one of the most important things you can do is build up your feedback. The other thing we need to look at is how do we look like a legitimate seller on eBay? Well, most legitimate sellers over the years, again, they've been doing this for over 25 years. Most people who are legitimate, when they get into eBay, they start by selling used items. They start by saying, oh, I've got this blouse over here that I don't wear anymore. I'm going to sell it on eBay. I've got these shoes that I don't want, this old purse, old book, movie, toys, whatever it is, and they start selling their used items on eBay first. And that's what I would suggest you do for 2 reasons. Number one, it puts eBay at ease. It lowers all the red flags. They feel more confident with you. Number two, you get some practice getting started, and you go through the motions without worrying about losing money on a transaction because it's a brand new $1,000 item, right? And so it gives you a little practice, makes you look good to eBay. They feel more comfortable about you. Now, ultimately, you probably don't have a warehouse full of thousands of items, right? So it doesn't have to be anything valuable, or in fact, even for your very first item, I recommend listing something like a paperclip or a piece of junk mail, something that literally doesn't have value but allows you to go through the steps, go through the process with no worries about making a mistake. Because who cares if you make a mistake on a paperclip, right? It just doesn't matter. But then if you can, even if you have to go to the thrift store and buy a few 25-cent items or something, to get started, it looks good to eBay, and it'll help you build up your reputation, make sure that they feel confident with you, and give you that much needed and valuable practice. I've actually made thousands of dollars, good money, from buying things for $1 or less at a thrift store and then turning around and selling it for much more. And so you can oftentimes make really good money that way too, but it's a really good way to start. To figure out how to list, what it's going to sell for. And this is important. If you're going to go buy something, if you're ever going to pay for an item, you need to know what to expect to sell it for first. Okay? So we've got a search here right now for ice makers. If we scroll down on the left-hand column, you see all these little check boxes and radio buttons. And the last section is show only. Okay? And so this says, hey, only show items that returns are accepted, completed items, sold items. Oh, well, that might be interesting. This is one of the things I love about eBay. We can come in here and say, only show me sold items, and we click on that. And now we're looking at items that match that search but have actually sold. And these are sales within the last 3 months, okay? And so if we're looking at a red Magic Chef 27-pound capacity portable countertop ice maker, in a thrift store, and they've got a $5 price tag on it, and it looks brand new, well, then we pull it up on our phone, and we look in the eBay app on our phone, and we see, oh, well, that same item just sold for $110. Yeah, I think I'll spring the $5 for this because I could probably sell it for 80 or 90 at least, right? And so you always research that, and you want to see the exact same item in that case selling, and selling for much more than you might pay for. Okay. My rule of thumb with something like this is I think about the cost of shipping, and so generally if I'm going to buy something in a thrift store that's going to sell for $40, I'm going to assume $5 to $10 for shipping, and so if I can buy it for $1 or $2, it's worth doing, because if I can sell it for $40, I only paid $1 for it. Even if I only make 30 profit out of that, that's huge. That's 3,000% markup. Right? And so it's a great margin. Now, ultimately, we'll want to teach you how to do drop ship and stuff, but again, if you start by listing all these brand new items as drop ship, and that's how you start your business, up goes the red flag for eBay. They're concerned about you. They're scrutinizing you a little closer. They're not going to be near as willing to open up the floodgates and let you list more. But if you start with the used items in the beginning and then start sprinkling in some drop ship, then you look a lot more legit, a lot more normal to them, and they are far more willing to let you build your business faster. We don't have to have a focus on eBay. We can sell a little bit of everything. It's no big deal. Okay? In fact, most of the time you get in here and look at some of these sellers and you go visit their store or see other items that they have, they don't sell just appliances or just the ice maker. Here they've got furniture, they've got paddle boards, they've got all kinds of different items. They've got tools here. They've got a metal detector. So they're not, eBay is an anything goes kind of thing. When we get into the website, that's where we'll want to focus more on a niche. But eBay, everything, anything and everything. I've sold a lot of weird things on eBay that you'll hear about in the future. Start with something that you don't think has value, something simple. Literally, it could be a plastic spoon or a pencil or a paper clip. That's your first listing, so you go through the motions, you get comfortable. Then we'll start listing other used items that might have a little more value. Okay? And I would do 10 or 20 at least that way. Who knows? You might find that that's the way you want to go because the profit margins are just enormous, exponential compared to a drop ship where you might only make a slim, 5 to 20% margin. So, but that's, we'll teach you both avenues. Just make sure that you're starting in a way that will lower the red flags, build your reputation. And then the other big thing is, remember, you need to build that feedback score. And so you'll want to watch my webinar on that and make sure that you get started doing that right away too. Okay? Okay? And don't take too much time doing it. I mean, gosh, that's something you should be able to do within the first week. Let's get it done, knock it out, and move on and grow the business. And if you see a bunch of things at a thrift store that you can make a ton of money on, great, buy a few more if you're comfortable with that. If not, we can move to the drop ship, but understand drop ship also has its pros and cons, and we'll talk more about that in other discussions, but there are good and bad to every strategy. You've just got to choose where you're willing to put your time and learning curve, okay? So that should give you a good overview of what eBay's looking for and how to get started. So now we want to just jump into it and begin the process.